The morning light had barely touched the quiet edges of Houston when a tired but determined single father named Mark Weston stepped out of his small apartment, holding nothing but a worn-out folder, a cheap wristwatch repaired with tape, and the hope that this day might finally change his life. His shoes, cracked at the sides and softened by months of overuse, slapped against the pavement as he began a long 10-mile walk toward a job interview he needed more than anything. His breath formed faint clouds in the chilled air, and every step felt like a reminder of how far he had fallen since life had broken down around him. But Mark kept walking, driven by the image of his 8-year-old son, Noah, still sleeping on their mattress on the floor, unaware of the storm his father was fighting to protect him from. What Mark didn't know was that a black SUV had slowed down behind him, and the man inside, one of the wealthiest CEOs in Texas, was quietly watching him, sensing there was something extraordinary in the way this exhausted father refused to quit. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and humanity, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Mark continued down the long stretch of road, the sun rising higher as sweat collected on his forehead despite the cold. He had lost his car 2 months earlier when he couldn't keep up with the payments after being laid off from a factory job he had held for 8 years. Since then, he had walked everywhere, to part-time work, to the grocery store, and now to an interview at a construction company where he hoped to earn enough to bring stability back into his son's life. His body ached, but he never slowed, whispering silently that quitting was a luxury he could not afford. Each mile felt heavier, but his spirit stayed sharp and unbroken. Meanwhile, the CEO inside the SUV, Christopher Hale, a 52-year-old man known for his stern leadership and private lifestyle, watched silently. That morning he had insisted on visiting a job site personally, something he rarely did anymore. But fate had placed him on that road at the exact moment Mark was beginning his long walk. Christopher couldn't understand at first why a man in interview clothes, shirt too big, pants a little faded, carrying a folder nearly falling apart, would be walking miles along a highway. The driver suggested passing him, but something in the man's stride made Christopher say no. He kept watching. By mile 5, Mark's legs trembled. He stopped for only a moment under the shade of a billboard, breathing hard, clutching the folder he had kept safe for weeks. Inside it were certificates he earned years ago, a resume printed at the local library, and a little drawing his son had given him that morning, a stick figure family holding hands with the words, "You can do it, Dad." That drawing felt like fuel. Mark pushed forward again, unaware that the SUV behind him had slowed to match his pace from a distance. When Mark reached the construction company's building, sweaty, exhausted, and with a soreness running through every muscle, he didn't know that a powerful man was just steps behind him. Inside the waiting room, the receptionist gave Mark one glance and hesitated, noticing his worn-out shoes, his damp hair, and his tired eyes. But Mark stood tall, speaking calmly, steadying his breath, and holding the folder to his chest like it was the last piece of dignity he had left. He had been looked down on many times in the past months, but today he refused to let shame bend him. Christopher entered the building moments later, removing his sunglasses and observing quietly. He had already made a decision before he ever stepped inside. He had seen determination before, at job sites, in people who had built their lives from nothing, but something about this single father's perseverance under impossible circumstances struck him in a way he couldn't ignore. The interview began with Mark sitting across from 2 supervisors. They asked routine questions, but behind those questions was something deeper. They were trying to understand the man more than the resume. Mark answered with honesty, never exaggerating, never pretending to be someone he wasn't. He explained how he had worked long shifts, how he had learned construction skills over the years, how he had raised his son alone, and how losing his last job nearly broke him but not enough to stop him from standing there that day. His voice trembled once, only when he mentioned wanting to build a better life for Noah. Then the door opened, and everyone straightened. The CEO himself, Christopher Hale, stepped inside. The supervisors looked confused. He never attended interviews. Christopher asked Mark only one question, how he got to the building. Mark hesitated, unsure if the truth would make him look desperate. But he answered quietly that he walked. Not because he wanted sympathy, but because pretending otherwise felt wrong. The room went silent. Christopher knew everything, he had seen the entire journey. And in that moment, he understood the weight of the determination he had watched for miles. Without hesitation, the CEO offered Mark a job on the spot, not an entry-level role, but a position with training, benefits, and growth opportunities. Mark's eyes widened with disbelief, as though he needed time to understand that after months of losing everything, life had finally handed him a moment of grace. As the CEO left the room, he gave the supervisors one final instruction: make sure this man never has to walk 10 miles to reach another opportunity again. Days later, Mark arrived at his first day of work in a company vehicle provided by the CEO. His son Noah ran around him excitedly that morning, proud of his father in a way that words couldn't capture. And as Mark stepped onto the site, he felt a strength he hadn't felt in years, the strength of being seen, valued, and lifted when life had pushed him to the ground for too long. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support brings powerful and meaningful stories to more people. Before we end, tell us in the comments what moment of the story moved you the most. And just like that, a man who walked 10 miles toward hope discovered that sometimes the right eyes see your struggle, and the world gives you a chance you never expected.